whale entanglement later tonight. I'm looking forward to that discussion as well. And the albatross is kind of the poster child for the way it feeds, skims the surface, lives out at sea for months at a time, picks up things off the surface that look like food, takes it back, regurgitates it, gives it to its chicks. Its chicks fill up with plastic in their stomach, aren't able to survive. This is Mae West. Mae West is the poster child for what happens to a young animal when it gets entrapped in a piece of plastic. Mae West is still alive. She lives in New Orleans. They don't remove the ring because they're afraid that it would kill her. Our own research vessel, during one of the voyages, I think this was 2009, Marita, got caught in a ghost net. You would think we would know better. And then another thing that actually was interesting in looking at the pictures that David was talking about fish moving from Indonesia and how the species only get so far. Well, the migration of species is an issue because as marine species taxi on materials like plastic, you can get a tremendous invasion. Everybody knows about zebra mussels and what they've done in the Great Lakes. This is a plastic bag, looks a little bit like a mothership out of Star Wars or something, huh? And then a plastic laundry basket that is a condo for David. What kind of fish are those? See, I'm not a marine biologist or an ichthyologist. And then coral can encrust. I think this is part of an aquaculture, a piece of plastic that is broken off. Things can move. And then another interesting thing about what's happening with plastic is if you look at that bottle up top and look at the edges happen, the very edges of those are the right size and shape to have been nibbled on by a triggerfish. And in fact, we've taken samples of fish in our most recent voyages and done necropsies on them and evaluated and studied to see what they were ingesting. On the left are bits and pieces of squid beaks, things like that. On the right are pieces of plastic. One voyage, we sampled 671 fish. 35% had plastic in their stomachs. And we're not talking big fish either. We're talking myctophids. We're talking the smaller fish, the feeder fish. I've been told that the myctophid species, if you added up the total weight of the myctophids, that it would outweigh all the other species of fish in the ocean. And they're very small, but they are, in fact, beginning to ingest plastic. So if you look at the issue of toxins, and on the right is a rainbow runner, and David showed us a couple of pictures of rainbow runners earlier, but this particular rainbow runner grew up underneath a raft made of 15,000 plastic bottles that was sailed in 88 days from Long Beach to Honolulu a few years back by our Director of Research, Dr. Marcus Erickson. That was done as an awareness project to let people know that plastic had some issues. Well, what a lot of people didn't know was that they only planned for being at sea about 60 days. And by day 88, they were really counting on finding some more food. So they caught this fish that had been living and growing underneath their boat and filleted it, opened it up, and in fact found plastic in its stomach. A little ironic. So should we be concerned? And why should we be concerned? Well, the issue of food web contamination and what plastics are all about is something that myself as a chemical engineer who dealt on the dark side for many years, I worked with companies like Monsanto and another chemical company for a while, and my good customers in the oil and gas business are beginning to understand more and more about these issues. Susan Casey, who now is the editor of O magazine, wrote an article a few years back about our oceans turning into plastic, and are we? And it's a great read, if you can find that. In 2010, Brian Walsh in Time magazine published an article about the perils of plastic. Plastic seemed harmless when it was first made, but there are issues with how it is contained and what it does that we need to be aware of as we're making decisions about what we do and how we use this material. Dr. Shigi Takada from Japan has something called the International Pellet Watch. And he gathers samples from all over the world of plastic pellets. And this is the pre-production plastic nurdle. And nurdle actually made its way into one of the dictionaries a couple of years ago because of some of the work that one of our volunteers did. But these nurdles, as they spend time at sea, the plastic is organic in nature. It's made out of hydrocarbons, right? So it will absorb other organic materials. Organics like organics. So if there's something in the water that's organic in nature, it will tend to absorb on plastic. And so what happens is that when you analyze the material for its content of the contaminants, you can have up to as 1,000,000 times more contaminant on that plastic as you do in the surrounding water. So you create, the longer something is at sea, you create a potential poison pill. And I'm not going to dig into all of this stuff other than to let you know that, we talk about POPs, persistent organic pollutants. They include things like pesticides, PCBs, and other hydrocarbons that do not do good things for us. And this is just kind of some verbiage about the food chain and how they get into the food chain, but this is basically what we're talking about. If you start at the upper right with plastic waste, it gets into our waste, our water, and because of economics, it winds up, maybe isn't as protected as well as it should be, or it's not handled as well as it is. Then it turns into an environmental health issue. The plastic then picks up those pollutants, like we just showed you on that last slide. Those can migrate to marine life. The fish, we've shown the fish ingestion now. And what's the impact on human health? This is becoming a worldwide issue. In Paris, the United Nations has convened to find out what happens with microplastic particles and has determined that there indeed needs to be an assessment of this problem. The United Nations Environmental Program says, as I showed on that yearbook slide earlier, this is an emerging issue. We need to do something about it. Captain Moore says plastic needs a timeout. In the past, only high levels of contaminant mattered, but now it impacts at everyday levels. A high dose used to make a poison, but now the timing of the dose is critical. Endocrine disruption is a new study that is beginning to really focus on potential contaminants associated with plastic. Exposures like this in experiments show that obesity can be a result of an endocrine disrupting material. And there are studies published just last year that plastics, in fact, release endocrine disrupting chemicals. And you can see the kink tail in this picture of the rats, or mice rather, due to epigenetics, which is the study of how genes and DNA interact with each other. So is it important to you and I to understand what's going on? For example, very simple, polyethylene terephthalate water bottle, common water bottle. Dr. Leonard Sachs did research on that, took water bottles off the shelf, found in fact that DEHP, which is one of the plasticizers that is a known endocrine disruptor, can in fact leach into water bottles. And then you look at the fourth point down, when contents are acidic, like vinegar, spaghetti sauce, and right above that, if it's a high temperature, they leach faster. So if you have kids or grandkids that have not yet reached puberty, and you have an opportunity to keep them from eating or drinking things that have been in contact with plastic, that'd be a very good thing to do. Try to minimize that where you can. Now, is there any hope? In fact, there is. If you can reduce your exposure and consume materials that have less BPA or DEHP from the food packaging, you can in fact lower those levels. So there are things we can do that will make a difference. And then just a couple of notes on what you can do personally. Take a look, how big's your plastic footprint? Try to set an example for your kids, the rest of your family, your coworkers, on what you can do to reduce your intake and consumption of plastic materials. Marita and I have a common goal these days when we go to a restaurant and say, no straw, please. why is it that they bring you a glass of water or iced tea and they automatically have a straw in it? We asked somebody the other day and they said, well, our glasses aren't clean. It's like, wait a second. But it's a good way to engage people and to get them to talk about the topic without really being offensive. Get involved if you can. And if you're into politics at all, support appropriate legislation. We're not saying ban everything. Plastic's a great product in its right use. Sustainable industry solution, I'm going to talk real briefly about number 2, extended producer responsibility. I was involved in the industry for many, many years. If a producer takes responsibility for what they make and they don't go cradle to grave with it, but they go cradle to cradle, they've got a chance for designing something and making the production of that material truly sustainable. Several other things you can do, switching to reusable products, compostable materials. Be involved. Help us with our support research, or if you know other people that are doing research, support that. You can increase your knowledge. Captain Moore's book was just released in October last year. It's out in a lot of bookstores. You can get it on your Kindle. I think it's an interesting read. I know I'm biased. You got a chance to learn a little bit about what's going on and how he did what he did. And then we've got a couple of things that we're working on, and I'm not going to dig into these a whole lot. I do want to let you know that we focus a lot on education, that we do voyages, and we try to get kids involved with blogs and interacting with what we're doing in a research while we're at sea. We are, in fact, in the midst of doing our final planning for a 2-stage voyage, first from the Marshall Islands to Tokyo through the Western Pacific Garbage Patch, which has not been very well analyzed for plastic content. And then we're going to go through the tsunami drift through the Pacific from Tokyo back to Maui. And actually we're going to land at the Maui Ocean Center. And we're very, very excited about both of those legs, understanding what's going on, and really focusing on what the issues are with plastic pollution that we'll find on both of those legs. And we are pretty much have leg 2 filled. There may be one spot left where we do have spots yet available on leg 1, if anybody's interested in actually going or sponsoring somebody to go. So we'll continue to try to figure out how much plastic's out there, help you all learn that maybe we can't fix the problems overnight, but maybe eventually wisdom will prevail. So thank you all very much.